Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to do a third year review video just to wrap up this year before starting fourth year next week. I just thought it would be good to sit down and talk about how I found third year, what my tips are, and also answer some of your questions that I asked you to send me on Instagram. Most of the questions were based around placement or exams, so I'm going to split the video into two. I'll start off by talking about placement and then we'll talk about exams. I feel like I spoke about the research project a lot back when I was doing it, so if you're interested in knowing more about the research project from third year, then definitely go and watch my vlogs from before Christmas. Let's start off by talking about placements. So at Southampton in third year, we have 3 placements. I started on primary care, then I did surgery and orthopaedics, and I finished off on medicine and elderly care. I was based in Southampton for GP and for surgery, and then I was based in Winchester for my medicine and elderly care placement. Each of the placements were 7 weeks long, and we were literally on placement from January to June with 5 or 6 days off over the Easter weekend. So it was a really full-on 6 months, and I guess I'll quickly just go over each placement and how I found it, and then I'll answer your questions on placement. So GP placement was by far my least favourite, and that wasn't because I don't enjoy GP. I think I could definitely see myself being a GP, and I worked with some really lovely doctors and physician associates and nurses while I was on my placement. We were thrown in at the deep end because we got to have our own patient list, and they would come in, we take a history, and then we go and consult with a GP in another room. But it kind of felt like I had some independence there to take a history on my own and like get to know the patient. So I would say that would be the best part about my GP placement. For me, the biggest issue was it was a logistical nightmare. When I first got my placement through, it said I was going to be based at practice in Woolston, which is just outside the centre of Southampton. It was about a 25-minute bus journey from where I was living. So I thought, great, that's going to be amazing, easy to commute to. And then on day one, they told me and the 2 other students that we were actually going to be based at 8 different sites all over Southampton. Some days we'd be expected to go to one in the morning and a different one in the afternoon. And so began 7 weeks of me traipsing around Southampton on various different buses. And we're not just talking city centre, we are talking as far as Botley, which isn't even in Southampton, it's classified as Hampshire. Some days I was catching 6 or 7 buses, and it was freezing cold, and I was spending like 3 hours total sat on public transport for like 2 hours in each practice. Sometimes I'd travel for an hour and a half to be told there wasn't any patients, or the person I was supposed to be shadowing was off sick and there was absolutely no one else I could go and be with. So there was a lot of time wasting on this placement, a lot of pointless moving around, and it kind of took away from the enjoyment of it all for me. And I do get to do another GP placement in final year, so I'm really hoping that my placement in final year is going to be based at one practice so I can actually get to know people a bit more. The person as well who signed me off on the placement at the very end, I'd only met once in 8 weeks, and they had to give me feedback on my performance over 8 weeks, and I don't know, it just felt a little bit impersonal at the end, and the whole thing was a bit of an anticlimax. The jury's still out on whether I will want to be a GP, but that placement just wasn't a good start for me. But I mean, it was probably for the best that it was my first one, because it meant all the other placements felt like a breeze after this one. So then I moved on to surgery and orthopaedics at Southampton General. I was tied to a consultant colorectal surgeon, and he was very intense but really lovely. He definitely wanted me to be involved in the placement. To be honest, it made this placement so much more enjoyable because I felt like he actually wanted me to be there at his surgeries and to go on his ward rounds and stuff. It was also so much more chilled out. On GP placement, you really did have to be there 9 to 5 every single day, whereas on surgery, like if it was like 4 o'clock and there was nothing to do, someone would be like, you can go, like it's fine. It wasn't as like, you must be here all day. It meant that you could make time to go to the library and do some revision. There wasn't really any time for that on GP because we were timetabled all day to be with someone, whereas on surgery we were much more independent. I could decide what I wanted to do each day. If I wanted to go to a ward round, go into theatre, go and take histories of some surgical patients, and then if something interesting came up, I could go away and revise it. Much better in my opinion. I really enjoyed that placement, and I really enjoyed surgery. I thought I was going to be really squeamish, but there was one day where I got to go into theatre, and I don't know how it really happened. What I'd find with this placement as well is you'd show up in the morning and you wouldn't always totally know what your day was going to look like. And one morning, me and my friend Rachel got called in. I didn't really want to scrub in, but he was like, you're scrubbing in. So I was like, okay. Next thing I know, I'm helping hold things, move things around, holding a camera. I had to staple up the patient at the end, and I got so involved. And all the adrenaline was running through me that by the end of it, I didn't even realise it was happening. I just did it because I did what I was told. And I really enjoyed it. And I was like, oh, maybe I don't hate surgery. Maybe I could do this. So that was a complete surprise to me, and I definitely thought it wasn't going to be for me, but I really enjoyed it. I also had a week on orthopaedics, which was good. I went to a trauma and orthopaedics ward round. There was a really good meeting they did where they went through all of the new intake from A&E and like all the different injuries, and there was loads of x-rays. I found that really interesting week as well, and I kind of wish we had more time with orthopaedics. I got to see a surgery where a patient with scoliosis was having their spine realigned and straightened, and that was so cool to watch. So I do think actually overall surgery was my favourite. And then in late April, early May, we did our final placement, and mine was medicine and elderly care in Winchester. Now surgery was my favourite placement, but medicine and elderly care at Winchester, that was definitely the best hospital and most well organised placement I've done so far. If you're at Southampton and you get placed at Winchester, I promise it's so worth the commute. It's not really that bad. You can get the train or the bus, or you can car share, like a lot of people drive up, and I absolutely loved it there. The staff are amazing, the team there are so good. I know that they run the first year of the graduate entry, or the first and second year of graduate entry, so they're really well equipped to deal with medical students. I feel like I felt a lot less of a burden there, and I don't know if it's because they don't have as many medical students there at once, but like when I went to the wards, I just felt like people were a lot more welcoming and wanted me to be there, whereas at other hospitals I maybe sometimes felt like I was in the way. And so at Winchester I just always felt really welcome. Medicine ward rounds were a lot longer than the surgical ward rounds. I definitely feel like I learned a lot there as well, because there was a lot of teaching, and I think that a good placement will have teaching that complements what you're actually seeing on placement, because you can't always control what you see on placement. Sometimes you might go in and there's nothing to see and it's really boring and you feel like you've learnt nothing and you've wasted your time. But because at Winchester we always had scheduled teaching, even on those days where there was less going on, I still felt like it was worth a trip there. I thought now I would answer some of your questions about placement. Do you have any top tips for placement? I've thought about this. I've got 4 main tips for you that I want to share. You are definitely going to need to get used to that feeling of awkwardness and feeling a little bit like you're a spare part. You just have to remind yourself you're paying a lot of money to be there. You need to learn this stuff to get through the exams and to get through the course, and you're going to be doing it as a job eventually, so you just got to get used to it. And although sometimes people might make you feel like they don't want you to be there, you're allowed to be there and you should be there, so they need to get used to it. They got to teach the medical students, that's their job too. But saying that, my second tip is that if you feel like there's nothing to do and you're just kind of hanging around waiting, it's okay to leave and go and do some revision somewhere. Oh, I have to go, I have teaching, I have this thing. Like, just make an excuse and go and revise, because you do have exams that you need to pass at the end of the day. Another tip would be to always have a backup plan. I noticed a lot on placement we'd be scheduled for activities, but sometimes I'd show up and perhaps it wouldn't work out for some reason, so I'd have to go and find something else to do. For example, we were all scheduled to have a day or a couple of days on the acute surgical unit, and the day I showed up for my assigned slot, a lot of other medical students had showed up as well, and I don't know if there had been like some kind of mistake with the timetable. We all got shouted at basically. Somebody said, "There's too many medical students here, can you all just go away?" So even though I was supposed to be there, I decided to leave, and I went and found a lovely junior doctor to shadow for the day. So it's just about having a plan B in case your scheduled activity falls through for whatever reason. And my final tip would be to carry a little notepad with you. I had this little notepad with me all year, and it is full of so many little things, but all it will be is that a consultant or a nurse or someone will say something that I've either never heard of or don't know much about, and then I can go and look it up later. But you see so many things sometimes in one day, especially if you go on a long ward round, it would be impossible to remember everything you saw. So just jot things down, if you're being grilled and something comes up that you're not very confident on, you know to write that down. And yeah, definitely carry a pen and a notepad. You only need a little tiny one that can fit in your scrubs pocket. Any tips for building confidence to approach busy staff for teaching or sign-offs? So that's really hard, because one of the things I hated about placement was we had to get a signature to prove that we've been there every day. And I hate going up to people and being like, hi, please can you sign this for me? Thank you. Like, it's so embarrassing. Like, I'm a 26-year-old woman and I'm asking someone to sign a piece of paper to say I've been here. Like, I think you have to just swallow your pride and remember that the quicker you get that signature, the quicker you can go home. My tip for getting signed off actually would be to go, if you can find a FY1 or an FY2, because they remember what it's like, because they're only just recently out of uni, so they know exactly how it feels, and it's definitely easier to ask them. And most of the time they're more than happy to. I know once I was walking around in the corridor with 3 other med students, and this registrar just saw us and she was like, guys, do you want me to just sign you off so you can go? And we were like, yeah. When it comes to teaching, I know in the question it said getting teaching off people. Most doctors are really keen to teach. That's what I've noticed, and that's a really good thing about it, is they love teaching and talking about what's in front of them. Saying that sometimes you're on a ward round, the consultant just zooms through everything and doesn't involve you at all, and all you end up doing on the ward round is closing a curtain for 3 hours. That does happen, but most of the time, most of the ward rounds I went on, I'd at least be questioned or asked about certain things. But you'll learn on your placement which consultants like to teach, which doctors like to teach, and then you can just kind of stick with them. Any tips for balancing revision with placement? So this is kind of tying into exams, but it's just about finding time when you can to revise. But I also think that there's so many things I saw on placement that stick in my mind so much better for the exams, so it's not worth skipping placement to revise, in my opinion, because for me that's what really kind of has, I think, improved my learning this year, is seeing things. The more you're on placement, the more you're exposed to this stuff. Saying that, you really do need to do a lot of practice questions for the exams, definitely at Southampton. You do have to do a lot of work after placement, so I would come home in the evenings and do a couple of hours. But saying that, I don't think I really ramped up my revision until maybe like March, April. January and February, I very much was just adjusting to being on placement. I would try to do a little bit of revision here or there, but to be honest, most of my revision started in March. So just get used to placement and then start to build in revision slowly. Start using your Pass Med, Quez Med, Anki, whatever it is you use, gradually, and the more you go along, the more you'll find ways to fit it into your day, I think. And I've kind of spoken about this, but like some placements are more intense than others. On surgery, I had a lot more downtime, a lot more opportunities to sit and revise. Naturally, when we were on medicine and elderly care in May and June, I was just finding the time, because I had to, in the evenings, because I knew exams were coming up and we only had a 2-week revision period at the end. So I just knew that if I didn't revise in the evenings and on the weekends, I was never going to get it done. Unfortunately, that's just how it is. That's the hardest part of this course now for me, is like balancing the placement and the revision. During placements, have you had any difficult moments mentally? How do you manage? There are a couple of like difficult placement moments. I think like there was one where I was just hanging around on the ward, and then a palliative care nurse, a really lovely palliative care nurse, she just came up to me and was like, are you a medical student? And I said, yes, I am. And she says, I'm about to have a very difficult conversation with a patient. Do you want to come with me? I said, yeah, sure. And I watched this palliative care nurse discuss an end-of-life care plan with this patient, and talk about what his wishes were. And it was just kind of really emotional, because I was just like hovering in the corner watching this really important conversation, really difficult conversation, and this palliative care nurse just did the most amazing job. She was so caring, and I was trying not to cry. I didn't cry, but I definitely felt emotional, and I'd say that was the hardest moment for me of the whole placement, because I didn't really expect it. It just kind of happened. That was one of the moments where I realised like people get really sick, and like people are going to die, and I'm probably going to see people die on placement. Just dealing with it for me is just talking to my peers about what I've seen and we're all in the same boat and we're all going through the same experience. So it's so good to have that kind of support network. If there is anything that you really are struggling with, go to your academic tutor or the pastoral team at your university to talk to them, or even just talk to whoever your supervisor is on placement. Just make sure you tell people if you see something and it upsets you, because you're not supposed to deal with these things on your own if it is upsetting you. So I guess then I just want to talk about exams in third year. I did upload my exam results video a couple weeks back, but in a nutshell, in third year we had 2 exams. We had the OSCEs, which are the practical exams, and we had the AKTs, the Applied Knowledge Test, which was 140 multiple choice questions split over 2 papers. So third year was really different from second year. I mean, we had to prepare for OSCEs alongside exams, but also we didn't have a written paper and we didn't have anatomy anymore. So it was definitely very different. So I found the exams this year very difficult. It was a really intense exam period and I worked so hard. I was doing like 12-hour days in the library, full on for like 2.5 weeks, and before that I was doing placement all day and then going to the library in the evenings, so it wasn't easy at all. Saying that, I much preferred the exams this year to first and second year. So first and second year, it's very, you know, it's your physiology, your pathology, metabolism, anatomy, and there's a big paper where you have to write lots of things, like writing detailed processes about the body. In third year it seems to have just clicked a bit more for me. Now it's all like clinical and like applying what we've learned to scenarios in a clinical setting and like thinking about treatment and side effects. Like, it's just much more what I thought medicine would be, and it just makes a bit more sense to me. And then the OSCEs, obviously, we did have a kind of practice OSCE in second year, but these were a lot more scary because there were 16 stations and a lot more was expected of us. They were absolutely terrifying, but I kind of felt good on the day afterwards. So I feel like with an exam, a written exam, it's really hard to know how you've done, whereas in an OSCE, I just feel like you kind of know, I think. I don't know. I liked the OSCEs in the end, although they were absolutely terrifying. Standing outside of the booth, reading the brief before the bell rings to go in, like, there's no feeling like it. It's actually terrifying. And the fact that we had to be held in a lecture theatre for like 2 hours prior to the OSCE on one day and 2 hours after the other. It was a stressful time, but I think the biggest thing for me about medicine is the fact that the exams are everything. For my biology degree, you had coursework, you had labs, you had essays, whereas medicine is just the exam at the end of the year. There's no compensation. You either pass or you fail. There's no in between. There's no room for like, oh, I'll just do better on that one because I've done badly on nothing. You just have to pass. That's the pressure that gets to me during exam season. Most of the resources I used are the classic ones. I absolutely rinsed PassMed. My advice would be to use the finals question bank rather than years 1 to 3. I used QuesMed. Love a bit of QuesMed. I definitely feel like they have their strengths and weaknesses. I think PassMed are more like the exam questions, but QuesMed, I don't know, there's something about it. I like QuesMed. I didn't use Anki at all this year. I scrapped it. Got rid of it because I didn't use it for my resits last year, so I just thought, I don't know if Anki's for me, and that's my hot take. I would say that the main thing that got me through these exams, on top of the past paper questions, was my notes, and I absolutely love 0 to finals for making notes. I went through pretty much everything relevant to my year and the content in my year, and I made pages and pages of notes, summarised every different condition that we need to know. I think some of it went in, I don't think everything's gone in, but I figured out my way of learning now. I summarise the conditions and then just going back to back on the past paper questions, and that's what worked for me this year, and that's what I will continue to do. So a lot of people actually sent really sweet messages just saying like, well done for your results, you've done really well and stuff, so thank you so much. I am really proud of my results this year. I'm really happy and relieved that it all went well. Somebody asked what changed in your studying from second to third year. So I've touched on this. Like, not much really changed. I stopped using Anki, I used PassMed finals, I used QuesMed, and I made those summary notes, and I think just condensing the information really works for my brain. I can't just do past paper questions, I have to actually make notes because I learn, like I'm a visual learner. The process of drawing diagrams and stuff is really helpful to me. So like nothing massively changed. I think what changed more was the type of exam. Someone asked best ways to revise for med school, but I think I've covered my favourite tools that I've used this year. Do you think you put more time and effort into third year compared to first and second? They were very different years. I think it's really hard to compare. The first and second year, you do like hundreds of lectures. You do pretty much 9 to 3 of lectures every day, and there's a lot of content to cover. In third year, you're doing 9 to 3 or 9 to 5 placement, and there's still a lot of content to cover. I think in third year, it's probably safe to say I did more intense revision for longer. I started revision earlier than I did in second and first year, for sure. So if your exams are in June or July, start thinking about them properly in February, March, rather than like April, May, because once you get to April and May, it's too close, it's too close. Is 1 month long enough to revise for exams? I think 1 month of intense revision is enough, as long as you've been already revising building up to that 1 month. And a lot of people just want the exam tips, and I feel like I've touched on that. Just the more practice questions you can do, the better. When I was first starting out with Past Med and Ques Med, like 25 questions could take me 2 or 3 hours, because every single time I stopped I would revise a different topic. Whereas closer to the exam I could get through like 200 questions in 2 hours, because that's what you need to be able to do in the exam. So if at the start your multiple choice questions, it seems like you're spending a lot of time on it and it's really slow, that's fine. Like, you're just learning the stuff and you will gradually get quicker. It's frustrating, but it's worth stopping and taking that time with the questions and making notes on things you don't know anything about. And eventually you will start to learn the patterns of these websites and the way they ask questions, and you'll see keywords in the question that kind of means you can literally get the answer straight away. What I will say, be careful of that, because not all your questions in the exams are going to be like the ones on Past Med, which is why I think it's good to use multiple question banks. So when it comes to your real exam, you are not totally shocked by the questions in front of you, if that makes sense. And then just one quick one about how was your work-life balance in third year. I think that it was okay. I still managed to go on a couple of trips away. I went on tour with the Medics football girls. I went to Copenhagen over Easter. I have been to 2 weddings and 2 hen dos, now 3 hen dos in third year, and I still played football. I went to socials. Jack and I went on plenty of date nights. I think the biggest thing that took a hit this year was my YouTube channel in terms of how often I was uploading. I had to slow that down. It just wasn't feasible for me to upload a vlog every single week, because these vlogs I do take like 10 hours to edit. And I also didn't manage to work as many shifts at the pub. I actually took 2 months off around exams, and I had to cut down my shifts when placement started anyway. The first month was a bit of a nightmare. I kept showing up late for work because I would get stuck in like traffic or whatever on the way home from placement, and I was just letting them down too much, so I had to cut my shifts down quite drastically. And I changed my contract to 0 hour. Rather than doing scheduled shifts, I would just pick up shifts when I could, and that meant I didn't let them down because I was only committing to shifts I could definitely do. It didn't hit me straight away, but this summer has been when I realised just how much money I've spent this year, and I've not been bringing in the money like I was in first and second year. So this summer I have had to work a lot more, but I wouldn't change it. Like, it was so worth reducing the YouTube videos and reducing the hours at the pub to make sure I got the grades I needed at the end of the year. Like, I would do it all again, and I don't mind that I have to work a lot more this summer. Like, it will be worth it in the end. And I also just want to say, before I end the video, third year has been my favourite year so far in terms of friendships made, in terms of experiences. It's just so much more interesting being on placement rather than in a lecture theatre. So if you're in like first or second year now and you're finding it's all a bit like, what is all this for? I think when you start placement, hopefully you'll feel like it all kind of falls into place a little bit more, and you start to see the bigger picture of why you're doing all of this and all of these exams and all of this work. So yeah, and that is my third year review. Thank you so much for watching. If you do have any more questions about third year that I haven't covered, I will keep an eye on the comments for the next week or so. And yeah, thanks so much for watching. I will see you very soon with the first videos of fourth